I think what we saw with Sabella's speech today was digging really deep. And that's something that's very courageous to do for your first speech to a new group of people, but also possibly one of first speeches ever, certainly first speech in Sabella's current role. And I think what really kind of drew me into this speech was that reflection right at the beginning. Sabella dug deep with her speech, but she actually got us to dig a little bit deep first, closing the eyes, having that reflection, really kind of drew us into the speech. Now, I was sitting there kind of thinking, okay, what's Sabella going to do with this information? How is she going to kind of tap into these questions that she's been asking us? And then we had the unveiling of the character acts, and it was such a simple little thing. In fact, I'm going to take my headphones out so I don't clatter around everywhere. So this little turn around, embrace a new character. When you're speaking virtually, as Sabella was trying to work out, well, how do I demonstrate different characters or different transitions moving through time? So you've got to find these little techniques. So that was a really nice way to hit the different characters and bring us into the next story that she was sharing. And of course, sitting there listening along, and I was going, okay, these sound like people that Sabella's worked with. They sound like kind of client testimonials. And then Sabella brought in her own story. And that I thought was really powerful when it hit of, okay, these aren't kind of abstract people who we're hearing of through Sabella. Well, now we're actually hearing about Sabella herself as well as these other characters that we're hearing. So it was this really captivating beginning of the speech and drawing us into thinking about these difficult issues, thinking about these difficult topics, and getting us involved and invested in what Sabella was going to share next. So let's look at the other side of Sabella speaking as well, and look at, well, what can she do to sharpen this up? As she said, this is a smaller part of a bigger presentation. I'm guessing she might be delivering it physically. These ideas can apply virtually or physically, just have to tweak them depending on what setting that she's in. I think the first thing that Sabella could do, especially if she's in a physical setting, is anchor some of these characters onto the stage. So we've got the first character and she's at one point in the stage, second character at another point in the stage, and then maybe when she's sharing her story, she steps forward as if revealing, well, here is me and my story as well. So that's another way that she could add to the characters, as well as the turnaround kind of wardrobe change. I think also what could really work, especially if this is longer, is a little bit of commentary between the characters. So I noticed that there was some real resonation with that first story. We had Kathleen in the comments saying, oh, this is a story that I've heard so much. And I think if after that first story, taking a little bit of a check-in with the audience and finding out, you know, is this someone that you recognize? Is this an experience that you've heard of? And get a little bit of discussion going with the audience, involving them in the story and them in the topic, move to the next character and then do the same thing, a little bit of commentary, involve them in the topic. And that, I think, will draw them into each of these stories even more. And of course, they are then totally drawn in when Sabella shares her story as well. And I think for sharing the story itself, my last suggestion would be nerves. Of course, you're going to be nervous. You're sharing something vulnerable, you're sharing something personal. So a way to kind of process those nerves, when you feel the nerves coming and they're building that momentum, just take that little pause. I often say that nerves is like a boulder rolling down a hill. When the boulder starts gathering speed, you've still got a chance to stop it. But when the boulder goes faster and faster and faster and faster, then it's really hard to stop it from rolling. So anytime you start to feel the boulder is speeding up a little bit, take that pause, put on the brakes, and then start off again. And the boulder will go a little bit slower and those nerves will just kind of dip in energy a little bit. Whenever we're sharing something personal and vulnerable, of course we're going to feel nervous. Of course we're going to feel uncomfortable. And the last thing we want to do is to stay in that discomfort. We want to race through it as fast as possible. But where we connect with the audience most is in that discomfort, is in that deep vulnerability. So allowing ourselves to manage that process, and most importantly, allowing the audience to feel that as well. So I think if Sibel adds those couple of alterations and adaptations to this speech, then she can totally turn her speech around. We all got schooled by Marta's speech today. What a fantastic story that she presented to us. And she came flying out the blocks with that really punchy start. There was the staccato sentences, one after the other. Boom, 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 boom. Coming close to the camera, horror. This really kind of evocative, energetic start drew me in. I think it drew all of us in. I just had this little ding, ding, ding moment of sticking like frogs. I have never heard that imagery before. But you know imagery works when you see the image in your mind. And I went, oh yeah, you know, with the little web feet and everything like that. So that's when you know you've come across some great language use. Fantastic. Write that down and stick it in the archive for later, Marta. I also love the little role-playing acting out as well. The little kid who came in, kicked the toy, and then there was even the onomatopoeic Marta was really embodying this child and their little childish angst in that. I loved it. I loved the energy, but not just the energy, because you can be very energetic and not channeling it. Marta was channeling it in a way that added to the story and added to her speech. Now I've got a couple of suggestions for Marta, and I hope she won't throw her toys out the pram when I give her these suggestions. The first thing that I noticed was just a small bit of choreography. She was talking about 2 to 3 weeks. And as she went 2 to 3 weeks, she drew her timeline like this, which for her is left to right. For us, it was right to left. So just remembering where you are in terms of your stage. So if you are physically in front of the audience, everything you do will be reversed. If you're on camera, it might be reversed. Depends on the platform you're using, depends on your camera settings. Some cameras will automatically flip you. So your left to right is actually also the audience's left to right. Usually it doesn't. So it's the same as standing in front of a physical audience. So just remember your choreography when you're doing timelines, when you're demonstrating things, that your left to right needs to be flipped for the audience to see it that way. The second point that I'd make is we had this nice message that was coming in towards the end where, okay, so we'd heard these really entertaining stories. And I just put a little note of, I want to see where Marta's going with this. Yes, I like the entertaining stories, but I want to see why she's telling us the entertaining stories. And the message did come through at the end, this idea of uncertainty, this idea of taking a big step. So I was pleased to see how the stories narrowed into that take-home message at the end. I think that could have been seeded a little bit earlier and bring the audience into thinking about their journey being seen through Marta's story. And the point where I thought this could be done, Marta was talking about looking back at her glass. And I think if there was just a little question to the audience at that point, what is your glass barrier? Or where are you looking beyond the glass and wishing that you could be? Something like that, just to connect the audience in that moment so they see themselves in the story. And then they're along for the rest of the ride. They're along for the message of taking that uncertain step, feeling that it's the right decision, you know, following your heart, following your passion, all of the cliches kind of coming in. Just that little bit of seeding earlier on, I think would have helped bring together that take-home message at the end even stronger. I think one thing we definitely took from Marta's speech was that aren't we all glad that she made that decision 6 years ago? Because if she hadn't, we wouldn't get to hear all her lovely speeches here in the Virtual Speakers Club. First of all, this is the most prepared, unprepared speech I think I've ever seen. Almost to the point of, I'm wondering, was Nikesh just on the wind up here pretending that, oh no, I'm not prepared, and actually had this whole office set up ready for this situation today? I think he did a really good job of bringing us in early on in the speech by asking questions. And most importantly, I think he got the ordering of his questions right. Starting off with a simpler question: how many countries have you been to? Now, sometimes we might not have the exact total in our head, but we can probably say roughly X, Y, Z, roughly 5, 10, 15, 20, whatever it might be. So simple questions get us warmed up. And then a slightly trickier question after that: how long does it normally take you to prepare for a trip? Well, then you go, okay, well, when I went for the weekend away, I kind of just did it by the seat of my pants. But when I went for that 3-week trip, that was probably me planning for most of the year. So a little bit more thinking involved, but getting the audience warmed up into that. And then Nikesh was doing some really good responding as well. He was noting people's names in the chat. I heard him calling out Joy's answer, for example. That's the way to set up your interaction at the beginning, is go simple to more complex and keep the back and forth going with the audience. And then after that, we had the props. And this is where I'm thinking, right, okay, this is just some sharking going on here. Okay, so he's got booking.com on his phone. Yeah, okay, he's going to have his phone, but then he's got some food, he's got his wallet. And I went, hang on, how prepared is he actually for this? So some really good use of props there and bringing them close to the camera as well. And I really liked how the booking.com came on. So it wasn't just like you book something on your phone, he'd actually loaded the website and showed it to us. Just makes it a little bit more immersive and evocative at that particular moment. And then thirdly, I thought Nikesh had some really good gestures throughout. I might be misremembering, but I think with his last speech, I think that was something I might have brought up, that some of those gestures maybe got a little bit lost off screen. Whereas this time, I think the gestures were really on screen. We had variety of gestures coming through. They were coming through nice and strong. So if I did make that as a point for improvement last time, I've definitely seen it improve this time. And it's a good point whether I said it last time or not. That's what we want when we're speaking on camera. And it's easy to get those gestures lost. So we have to have that conscious effort to make sure they're coming up on screen. Now, how can Nikesh break some new frontiers with his speech? I think there was another really great point of interaction later on, but I think just a wee bit of sharpening up on how he executed it. So we had this tell us about a travel mishap. And I actually thought of mine straight away. It only happened to me last year. And so I started typing it in because I kind of got used to typing it in. And then I was nearly finished typing it and Nikesh said, you can shout it out if you want. And I thought, oh, it'd be much easier for me to shout that out rather than typing it all in. So I'd kind of got into that typing mindset. And then because it needed a little bit of a lengthier answer, I think the interaction was coming in a little bit slower. I think that would have been better as a verbal interaction. And if Nikesh just prompts that at the beginning, I'm going to ask a question now and feel free to shout out on this. Tell me about a travel mishap. Then that gets people into the frame of mind of, okay, this is something that I can say verbally. Then leading on from that, we all shared our travel mishaps. And I was like, man, Nikesh is talking about travel. He's an experienced journeyman. He must have an absolute corker of a story to share. And then he just moved on to the next point. I went, I wanted to hear your funny travel mishap. So when you get that kind of audience participation and interaction, play off it as well. So I think that would have been a really good opportunity to bring in some kind of mishap. It doesn't have to be a big, long anecdote. It can be one of your shorter anecdotes of a mishap, just to have that feeling of back and forth with the audience. Like we're all sharing mishaps. It's kind of, we're all like sitting around at a party, talking about our holidays, talking about our vacations. I think that would have been a really nice follow on to that bit of interaction. And then my final tip is actually about tips. Again, being an experienced journeyman, coming to the end, we heard about the why of travel. I also wanted to hear a little bit of the how as well. So what are some good travel tips? For example, is booking.com the best website to use? And if so, why is it the best website? How is it more competitive? How is it cheaper? Talks about waiting a long time at the airport. Are there ways to get airport lounges on like a really good deal? So these are the kind of tips that I think could have come in, selling the why of the travel, then provide the direction as well with a couple of take-home tips coming in at the end of the speech. Thank you, Nikesh, for stepping in last minute with this. I'm still not sure whether it was totally unprepared speech, but to all appearances, it came through unprepared, but still really well delivered. And looking forward to seeing where your speaking journeys take us
Yeah,
next.
thank you, David, and thank you everyone for your wonderful feedback.